So as you just mentioned, my talk is basically about how to organize your data and your documentation, your technical documentation. I show an example in a risk management file, of course, and what we call the digital thread and how to organize everything in a non-redundant way. I'm pretty sure most of you know about this kind of issue and know of potential solutions of how you can build up such a system. My main point is I want to increase the awareness of an issue that's behind this kind of managing non-redundant work items and documentation. So I call it, the subtitle is "Don't Get Trapped by the Digital Thread." Okay. And that's where I want to make some awareness. I get your attention to that kind of issue. And so that's what you're going to expect. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the more general part of how to manage redundancies. And maybe we play a little bit of Lego in that session. Then second of all, I'd like to introduce you to the threat of the digital threat, like I call it. So pay attention to not hop into that threat. And of course, after we were talking about the threat, I'd like to show you two different ways in how you can escape this kind of threat and how you can deal with this kind of issues in a very general kind of way. So before I start with it, I'd like to give a very, very brief introduction of myself. I'm also 20 plus years in the medtech industry. I've seen a couple of different companies in different kind of fields in different roles also. So I've been in requirements and systems engineering. I've been in quality management and regulatory affairs, in process design, and last but not least, risk management. So I did work for all those different companies and worked along the V process in development a couple of times. And these are some of the products that I've been involved in getting them into the market. So few words about the company, KARL STORZ. We are a 100% family-owned business with almost 10,000 employees worldwide. We had a 2.2 billion preliminary sales in last year and have 70 subsidiaries in 50 countries around the world. And more than 10,000 products in the medical field. And I come to that later because that is kind of the issue that we're facing and why we have to come up with good solutions to it. And just recently, just last week, it was the 18th birthday of our company. So there was a big party going on in Tuttlingen, which is pretty close to the Swiss border. Our portfolio is in the minimal invasive area. So we are in endoscopy and all that kind of surgery. That is the non-open surgery, including the entire image train, high frequency manipulating, but we are also making big systems in the OR room and connecting all different kind of devices together and make it very easy for the customer to use and work throughout their procedures, which is complicated enough. So get away with all the drain brain stuff and make it more easy for the customer. So this is all the different areas that we are, that you'll find KARL STORZ products in. And so it's 17 product groups, 1,200 basic UDI products, and as I mentioned, over 10,000 products. Okay, enough of that. Let's come to managing redundancies, especially if you have such a large portfolio and many, many products over the years that you have to maintain. All the data management, of course, is kind of a really, really big challenge. And if we would go back a couple of decades, everything was written on paper, and it could probably look a little bit like this. And I'm pretty sure most of you still have kind of a feeling, even though they work digital with PDF or Word or Excel or whatever kind of documentation systems, I think the feeling is kind of stays the same and remains the same than what we see here in that picture. And we all know a couple of tools which potentially are able to manage such a mess, but we also know their limitations. And so that is probably not the very best solution on how to deal with this kind of documentation, with this immense workload of documentation. So what is an idea, a basic idea of how to manage such redundancies? If we have different kind of products, and this is just an example of a product portfolio, of course, each and every product has its own documentation. And because I'm in risk management, I show you a little systematic piece of a risk management file. I'm pretty sure all of you know those huge Excel sheets or whatever kind of sheets with risk management lines. And if you take a closer look in between different products or different product groups, I'm pretty sure you find redundancies all over the place. Now, there's a certain law by a guy called Murphy. I'm pretty sure you're aware of it. And it's a well-known fact that redundancies over time become discrepancies. So that is the main reason of why we do not like to manage all those redundancies in a redundant kind of way, because nobody really knows over time if they walk into different directions, and nobody knows, okay, what is the true and what is the real issue here? Why is there so much different information all over the place? Now, I told you, let's play a little bit of Lego. Let's imagine our products weren't medical devices, but they were Lego packages like you can buy for your kids at home, right? So you can maybe have a certain set of products which are houses over time. It can be a beach house, can be a whatever you see here. And what's interesting, they all kind of contain the same blocks or the same subsets of parts, just as we have in our documentation. We have all the same structure within the technical documentation, and things are repeating itself all over time. So we have these blocks containing of smaller parts, and then the smallest part. And this smallest part is what we call the digital work item. So that is the smallest part of information that doesn't make any more sense to cut any further into smaller pieces. So kind of an atom level, so to say. Now, if you look back from the digital work item towards your products, the integration level of this kind of work items is increasing. And how do you manage redundancies? Well, you put traces between all those kind of different Lego parts. And a trace pretty much works like kind of a mirror. So on the one hand, you have the digital work item, and on the other one, you have kind of a mirror. And this way, the information is being mirrored all the way down to your product. Everywhere where the information is being needed, it's being shown, but it is only maintained and defined in a single point of truth. And that is the important way of such non-redundant information management, that you try to define only one point in your system where you define and maintain these smallest kind of information. I'm pretty much, I think everybody of you pretty much has a basic understanding of these kind of systems. And just to give you another detailed look at it, if you see the risk analysis here with all different kind of items that we have in such a big system here, we have single points of truth. The smallest digital work items, for example, as a risk control measure, which is a requirement, can be the smallest part. It doesn't make sense to put a risk control measure into single words, for example. They are one logical block, and they can be reused. Or the harm, the hazardous situation, or the events. They can be all different kind of events within the sequence of events in a risk management file. These are defined by the smallest work items. Then within a risk control, within the risk matrix, we already start to integrate those little tiny pieces of information. The digital work items, for example, harm and severity is a good example. Whenever there's a harm, there's one severity level which belongs to that kind of harm. And we only want to define it at one point in the entire company. Because even though it's being reused in many, many different products and many, many different risk management files, it wouldn't make any sense to take one and the same harm in one file, it's severity class 2, and in the other file, it's severity class 4. What's the reason? If any auditor comes to a company and looks into a risk management files and sees and discovers this kind of inconsistencies, you gotta get some bad questions to answer. So we only want to define them once. Then an entire risk line, for example, can be considered as a brick, and a subset of all these risk lines then can be some kind of a container, or let's call it a module, which covers a certain topic of your medical devices. For example, if you have devices which are supposed to be reprocessed and sterilized, then maybe you have one set of risk controls or risk lines which take care of all the risks that come along with all the reprocessing issues. Or maybe you have another set of products which is imaging, right? So whatever can go wrong on your imaging chain, so your image is not as expected, you have one set, one class, one module of risk lines. And from there, then you go into your products, and the products only take those kind of big badges and prepared modules, and you're pretty much done with risk management then. Now, the nice this kind of system looks, there's one thread behind it. And now I really want to make you aware of this challenge that comes with your modular system or with your digital thread. And just to give you a little spoiler, it's about change management. So going back to our Lego system, let's imagine we have built up this entire system, everything works well, we have made all of our products in this digital thread, we have all the information in just a single point of truth, we cut it down to digital work items, everything is fine and working. But now, at one point in time, you want to make some kind of improvement. Either there's a new risk control measure, a new technology, you have to keep your products up to latest state of the art, or whatever it is that you want to improve. You're going to change something. So the digital work item here on the right-hand side does change. And because we have those traces, and they are only mirroring the information from that single point of truth, at the moment you do a change, whoops, all of a sudden, your entire line, your entire digital thread changes as well. Because it's just a trace link, it's just a mirror. And if your entire product documentation is in the same system, you basically have to update all your products and implement the new risk control measure or whatever you have right away. And you can imagine if you have a portfolio with many, many products, it's impossible for a company to implement this new idea, this new latest, greatest kind of information into your products. You have to run so many different projects just at once, just because you want to improve one thing. Now, I hope that gives you an idea of what is the thread behind this kind of digital thread. Now I want to give you two kind of opportunities on how to escape this digital thread. The first one is a pretty simple system. And this system also has kind of its limitation, but I'm going to show you. Now, this is the trace chain that we have here. And if you exchange your product documentation, your DHF or whatever you want to call it, with a different kind of document, so you got to export your information into a commonly PDF, Word, whatever kind of document, and then put your approval processes upon this exported document rather than in the original database itself. If you do that, you kind of build two different kind of systems. You have the digital database on the right-hand side. That is the working level. That's where you put all your work and effort and everything in there. And then you press a button and you can export your PDFs and everything which is important for your quality management system, everything which is important for regulatory, everything which is going to be shown to your auditors and to authorities, that is then being excluded from the digital database. And that way you can get rid of the last trace. So the last trace is something which is under your control. You have to press a button and then you get the document and can approve it at whatever is the appropriate time for the project to take the latest, greatest kind of information. Now, if you look at this system, the downside of it is that while you can decide for the project and when to update, you cannot decide what to update. So it's basically take everything or nothing. Go to the latest, greatest, or stay where you are. So you don't have a choice on which way to update. That's the limitation of this, this kind of module. Now, the more profound escape I'd like to show you, and the picture kind of gives you an idea. It's about stacking Legos. First, we have to understand what is the real root cause of that issue, of that challenge that we have. And in the focus here is the trace link, the mirror link, right? So usually those traces are only bound via the IDs of the objects. So every kind of object in the database has an ID, an identifier. And whenever a version changes, whenever we update some kind of information, the older version becomes obsolete. That's what we all know in common quality management systems, right? If there's a new version, the old one gets obsolete. And it's not valid anymore. Therefore, this trace immediately has to update from the old to the new version. Now, that being said, now we understand of what is the root cause of our problem. We can try to solve it. And this trace error is kind of a Janus-folded or two-folded sword. It's on the good part is that we get the single point of information. We get a non-redundant system, which is great for us in order to handle all this kind of information, to keep it consistent. But at the same time, because the old version gets invalid, we are in trouble because all of our products would have to update right away. Now, what can we do about it? We're going to add the version to both sides of the trace link. It's not just the ID, but it's also the version itself. And whenever there's a new version available, for example, for another product which is being developed at your company right now, they need a more improved version of your digital work item, they can do so. The other products still can have the old link to the old version. The old version remains valid. That's something new for people who are working in QMS systems. But we're only talking about databases here, right? So whenever there's a new version available, this trace link can get a suspect link. So it basically says, hey, look here, there's something new available. Do you want to update to my new version? But it is still your decision if you want to update at all, to what new version you want to update, and especially when to update. Because the old link is still valid. And then at some point of time, you have a project going on because maybe some of your parts got obsolete in your products and you have to redo your project anyway, or your product anyway. Then you can press the button and say, okay, now it's time for this product to update to the latest, greatest, or maybe to another version, and then replace that link by a newer version of the digital work item. And thereby, by adding those kind of versions, you have the biggest flexibility in deciding on when you update, but at the same time, you're still managing these non-redundancies because they are piled up. The versions are kind of piled up like a Lego tower, and they have the same ID, but the trace links also have the version ID to it. Now, if we enable such a system, we not only can do change management, but we also can do release management. We can decide what bunch of latest updates we want to take into a product, and we don't have to do it every single time whenever there's new information available. Okay, just very quickly repeat what we just came up to. So starting with redundancies become discrepancies over time. Pretty sure everybody knows about that one. We have the digital thread, the entire chain that we have from the information to the smallest part, the digital work items. And when we do that, we can overcome these redundancies and are able to have a non-redundant system. But this non-redundant system, there's this big challenge of change management. Because in a regular system with regular traces, which just consider the IDs, whenever you change an information, because of your traces, everything changes all the way down to your product or your product documentation. Now, to overcome that, you can either export your documents and do your approval process on the exported documents. So you got a separated working database, and your QMS system only works for these PDF files, for example, or Word files. Or you can come up with a system which, beside the ID, also adds the version to the traces itself. And by doing that, you're much more flexible in terms of release management, because it's the product's decision on when to update and what to update. And you get more flexibility, but still are working in a non-redundant information system. Well, and then I'm pretty much done with it. If you want to contact me, unfortunately, I'm not on LinkedIn, but you can send me an email or you find me on Xing. And hereby, I'm done with my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. I must say that your ideas here, they resonate very much with me. We have similar backgrounds. I take it thinking about how growing up with the principle of not copying items, shunning copies. And what I understand from what you do there at KARL STORZ, you're looking for how can we reduce the number of copies that we have in our technical documentation. And I understand that this is an ongoing work. You have 10,000 products. There are probably millions of potential redundancies. But by creating or removing these redundancies, you reach a much higher level of consistency, and you also enable reuse, saving work, of course. And I'm super curious about like what kind of levels of removing redundancies is achievable. Do you have anything to say about that? Should I strive for removing 90% or consolidating 90%, or is it 50 or is it 10?
I think it might even be more than 90%. But also of course, depends on the complexity of your projects, the kind of individualism that your projects have, and the sheer number on how large your portfolio is. So, for example, when we are talking about minimal invasive instruments for surgery, they are all kind of the same design, but they come in 5-10 different sizes because it has to fit your anatomy. So a little scissor for a premature baby looks very much different than a big scissor if you remove something in an adult person. And all different anatomical structures require different sizes or maybe different forms, but the principle is kind of the same. and the design is kind of the same. So thereby the redundancy level can really extremely be removed. And to be frank, even if you want to come up with such a large portfolio, you have to have a non-redundant system in place. Otherwise, the manpower is very, very huge on how to maintain or even generate that information. And what we did in the past, we call it the modular system in risk management. So we have a little more than 100 modules, each for some kind of certain feature or some kind of function or some kind of intended purpose that the medical device has. And with these 110 modules, we provide pretty much 90%, 95% basic of a risk management file for those products. So a new product development can go to it's like going to a store and say, okay, I have this and this features. I take this, and this, and I have following functions. So I need this, and this. And then do I have everything? Well, maybe there are some spaces where I still have to do individual risk management for just only this product because it's new, it's something special, it's not like the other products. And you have to ensure, of course, that you're complete. So that works great, but the down part of it, because all of those modules are hard traced these modules are hard being traced to the products, we cannot by no means improve that system anymore. There is no change management because whenever we do a change, at some modules, there are 5,000 products being linked to the module. And when we change the module, we would have to change 5,000 products at the same time. That's impossible. And that's where we came up, okay, we want to have the non-redundancy. We want to keep that, but we have to get rid of this automatic tracing system. And that's why we came up with that version-controlled trace links.
I understand. Now, I have experienced similar systems where instead of having to invent the wheel over and over again, you have predefined libraries where you can go and find already established artifacts that you can use them, for example, in risk management. But instead of then, having to use my brain and formulate a sentence, I just doom scroll myself to death in these lists. Have you experienced something similar, and do you have a good tip for that?
Absolutely. And we are right now, we're building up a new system, and we are exactly in that kind of phase where we define something new. Of course, we take what we already have, and if it's good, there's no reason for not take it as it is. We don't want to reinvent everything, just as you said. But at some points, there is a pretty big room for improvement, which we want to use. And I think what we are experiencing so far are two ideas on how to deal with that kind of complexity. So the first one is that, again, we are building subsidiaries of this information, this kind of containers, this kind of module. So it's one feature. For example, pretty good example would be high frequency on this surgical instruments. If you want to do high frequency coagulation, that is some kind of a feature which is kind of unique. You know exactly, does my product support it or doesn't it? And then by filtering your information to high frequency, or building your own container, your own kind of bucket with all those Lego parts in there, you have reduced the complexity of your overall system right away. It's just maybe 2 or 3% of the entire risk management system is dealing about high frequency. And then there's 5% package of sterilization and reprocessing, for example. So that's the first part, breaking it down to a logical structure where many, but not too many risk lines or even requirements. You can use that kind of system for many different kind of information is being involved. The second part is that our team, we are right now, we are 10 risk managers at KARL STORZ in our team. But we decided that we have kind of a library team. Okay, so only 3 of us are the library managers, and they do work on the detailed database. They manage all that kind of information on the smallest level part, and to build the bigger buckets, which then can be used by the products. So this way, the information, the huge, immense information which is in your system, can be overseen by less people, and you have less chaos, hopefully. We are curious ourselves if that is going to work well. We are experiencing some kind of discussions, but it's kind of a good discussion, because the more people are being involved, we have to align in our heads also to the same kind of understanding on what kind of risk controls we want to make. Why do we want to phrase it this way, and why do we not want to phrase it that way? That's being communicated with the team, but we only have 3 library managers out of a team of 10, which are doing that kind of work. So
okay,
that's
so
kind of focusing.
Work in progress to be continued.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope I have the possibility to invite you again, Martin, to see you in a year or two, to
that would be great.
hear more about what you've learned in the meantime.